My name is Walter, and I was 39 years old when this story began. I worked as a newspaper editor, a job that consumed most of my life. I had been married once to a woman named Lydia. She wasn't just my wife, she was the best reporter I ever worked with. We met at the newspaper office years ago, and from the start, I knew she was different. Lydia was quick, intelligent, and absolutely fearless. She went after stories that other reporters were too afraid to touch. Everyone said we made a perfect team, both at work and at home. But perfection doesn't last forever. As time passed, cracks began to appear in our relationship. We started arguing more frequently. I wanted everything done my way, and I needed to control every aspect of our lives. Lydia, on the other hand, craved independence and freedom. The more I tried to hold on, the more she pulled away from me. Eventually, the distance between us became too wide to cross. One day, she packed her things and left. That was 5 years ago. In those 5 years, I never dated anyone else. When people asked why, I told them I was too busy with work. But deep down, I knew the real reason. I regretted everything. I regretted being so controlling. I regretted not giving her the space she needed. I regretted losing the woman I loved. Life continued around me while I buried myself in work. I spent long hours at the office, shouted at my reporters when they made mistakes, and pretended that everything was fine. But it wasn't fine. I was miserable. One ordinary morning, I sat at my desk drinking coffee when my old college friend Joshua walked into my office. He sat down across from me and studied my face for a moment. Then he asked if I had heard the news about Lydia. I shook my head, suddenly feeling anxious. Joshua took a breath and told me that Lydia was getting married. The words felt like a punch to my chest. I could barely breathe. Her fiancé's name was Bruce, and he sold insurance. Joshua explained that Bruce was the complete opposite of me. He enjoyed quiet mornings and peaceful dinners at home. They were planning to move to New York together, and Lydia had decided to leave journalism behind completely. When I heard that last part, something inside me broke. Lydia leaving journalism felt impossible. It felt wrong. That career was part of who she was. A few days later, Lydia came to the office to say goodbye to everyone. When she stood in front of my desk, I noticed how calm her face looked, but her eyes seemed cold and distant. She didn't really look at me. She said she was happy now and that she wanted a peaceful life. But peace didn't sound like the Lydia I knew. I forced myself to smile and congratulated her, even though my heart was breaking. I kept thinking about all my mistakes, about how I had chosen work over our relationship, about how I had pushed her away. I told myself it was too late to change anything now. But I wasn't ready to let go completely. I asked her to cover one final story before she left. There was a man named Earl Williams who was scheduled to be executed soon, and I believed the case was corrupt. I told her the city was hiding the truth. At first, Lydia hesitated. She didn't want to get involved, but eventually she agreed to do it. As soon as she started working on the story, I saw something amazing happen. The old Lydia came back. The passionate reporter returned. She stayed late at the office, asked tough questions, and moved with that same energy I had fallen in love with years ago. Watching her work made me feel alive again. But Bruce didn't like this at all. He started waiting outside the office, checking his watch constantly, clearly frustrated. One night, when Lydia was working late because the deadline was approaching, Bruce stormed into my office. He started arguing with her, his face turning red and his voice getting louder. I felt a mix of jealousy and anger watching them fight, but I also noticed something important. Lydia was changing. As she worked on the story, she seemed to forget about New York and her plans with Bruce. She stayed late night after night, completely focused on uncovering the truth. One evening, we were alone in the office together. Lydia sat across from my desk, and I could see that familiar fire burning in her eyes again. It was the same fire that had made me fall in love with her all those years ago. I moved my chair closer to hers. We spoke in quiet voices, leaning toward each other. Our hands were nearly touching on the desk. I could feel the warmth of her presence. I desperately wanted to reach out, to take her hand, to tell her everything I had never been brave enough to say before. Her eyes met mine, and for a beautiful moment, the rest of the world disappeared. I wanted to move closer to touch her, but I stopped myself. I wanted this to be her choice, not something I forced or begged for. Lydia leaned back slightly and laughed softly, that wonderful sound I had missed so much. I smiled and leaned even closer. I whispered that I had missed this, missed working with her, missed her. She smiled back at me. Then suddenly the office door opened. Bruce stepped inside and immediately froze when he saw us sitting so close together. His eyes narrowed as he looked back and forth between us. Disappointment crossed his face, followed by something else, perhaps understanding. He muttered that he would come back later, then turned and walked away, closing the door quietly behind him. Lydia didn't move. She stayed exactly where she was, looking directly at me. I could see her making a choice in that moment. She didn't run after Bruce. She didn't apologize or make excuses. She simply stayed. Then she smiled at me, and I understood. That night, we walked out of the office together. The city streets were noisy and crowded around us. The work would never end, and I knew that wouldn't change. I also knew I was still the same difficult, demanding person I had always been. I would never be the calm, peaceful man that Bruce was. But Lydia smiled and took my arm as we walked. She told me she knew exactly who I was, with all my flaws and complications. And this time, she said she was staying anyway. This time, she chose me with her eyes wide open, and that made all the difference.